Freeze that frame. Right now. Before this clip moves one more inch, I need everybody to go back and look at her hands, because what happened in the 60 seconds after this fight ended is the reason the entire internet is on fire this week. Every single fight before this one, the gloves came off immediately. Every single one. Seconds after the final bell, off, done, tossed aside. That was the routine. That was the ritual. But this time, Claressa Shields held onto those gloves like they were the only thing keeping her entire story together. And once you hear the explanation she finally gave for refusing to take them off, it does not just get suspicious. It gets worse. Much worse. So tonight we are breaking down the loaded glove allegation that everybody is whispering about and nobody in the boxing media seems brave enough to say out loud. And listen, I am going to walk you through a pattern that stretches back almost a decade, fight after fight after fight, and by the time we get to the detail about a little girl and a bottle of water at the press conference, you are going to understand exactly why millions of people replayed this footage frame by frame this week. Settle in. This one is heavy. Now, let me be crystal clear before we take another step. Everything we are discussing tonight is alleged, reported, and currently circulating online. I am not a commission, I am not a laboratory, and I am not here to convict anybody of anything. And honestly, I sat with this footage for days before I said a single word about it publicly, because accusing a champion like Claressa Shields of something like this is not a game. That is a career-ending, legacy-burning kind of accusation, and it should never be made lightly. But here is the thing about patterns. Patterns do not care about our feelings. And once you see this one laid out side by side, clip by clip, year by year, you genuinely cannot unsee it. So let us walk through it together, slowly, carefully, eyes wide open. Because it starts way before this fight. Way before. Go back to 2016. Fight ends, gloves off immediately. 2017, first fight, same thing. Second fight that year, same thing. 2018, gloves off within seconds. Every single time. No hesitation, no delay. Nothing unusual whatsoever. I went back and counted, and I do not mean I skimmed. I mean I pulled every post-fight moment I could find. Every clip, every angle, every backstage camera. And the pattern held up perfectly. No exceptions. Not one. For years, the behavior was so consistent you could set a watch to it. Bell rings, hug the opponent, gloves off, hands up, interview. That is who Claressa was after every single victory, and nobody ever had a reason to question a single second of it. Until now. Now here is the detail that lit the match. In every one of those previous fights, look at her opponents afterward. Look closely. Some redness, sure. Minor swelling, the ordinary bruising you would expect from a professional boxing match. That is the sport. That is normal. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, on any of those women looked like what we saw on this most recent opponent's head. A massive knot. Raised, angry, visible from the cheap seats. And it appeared almost immediately once Claressa started throwing. That is not standard fight damage. That is a siren going off in high definition. And the internet noticed instantly the second the footage started circulating, because something about this one specific fight looked completely different from every fight that came before it. When people put the photos side by side, previous opponents versus this one, the difference is not subtle. It is not debatable. It is sitting right there in plain sight. People in the comments were literally zooming in frame by frame, measuring the swelling with their own eyes, because that is how obvious the difference looked to the average person scrolling by. But wait, because the footage is only half of this story. The other half is the pressure cooker Claressa was living in when she walked into that ring, and if you do not understand the pressure, you do not understand why so many people believe something changed this time. For months, social media had been dragging Claressa Shields without mercy. Relentless. Every single day. They said she did not have real knockouts. They said if an opponent stumbles into the ropes and the referee waves it off, that is not a legitimate stoppage, that is choreography. They said Claressa Shields needed to prove once and for all that she is actually the elite fighter she has spent years telling everybody she is. And when that kind of noise gets loud enough, when thousands of strangers repeat the exact same message week after week after week, human beings start making decisions they would never consider in a quiet room. That is not an accusation. That is just psychology. And then, Right on schedule, right after the loudest stretch of criticism Claressa has ever faced, this fight happened. The knockout happened. And immediately, the questions about the gloves started pouring in from every direction at once. Timing matters. I need you to hear that. Timing always matters. Coincidences exist, absolutely, but this one arrived wrapped in a bow. Right when Claressa Shields needed a statement win the most, she got the most violent-looking win of her career, and the other woman left the ring with a kind of damage nobody had ever seen on any previous opponent. That is the kind of timing that makes people stop scrolling and start asking questions, and honestly, who could blame them? And this is where the story turns from strange to unforgettable, because after the bell, something happened that has never happened before. Not in 2016, not in 2017, not in 2018, not ever. Claressa kept the gloves on. She walked straight into the post-fight press conference still wearing them. She sat down at that table, cameras rolling, reporters watching, still wearing them. And at one point, a little girl had to bring a bottle of water up to her mouth and help her drink, because she would not take the gloves off to do it herself. Read that again. A child helped a grown champion drink water because removing those gloves was apparently not an option. Everybody else at that table had already taken theirs off. Comfortable, relaxed, normal. And there sat Claressa Shields, holding on for dear life, while the people around her exchanged looks you could not miss if you tried. You could see it on their faces in real time. Confusion first, then something closer to concern. And we are not talking about a minute or two here. We are talking about an extended stretch of time where she simply refused, point blank, to remove those gloves for any reason, while cameras documented every second of it. For years, Claressa could not get them off fast enough. This time, she treated them like evidence she was not ready to hand over. And whether that thought is fair or not, it is the thought millions of people had at the exact same moment, which is why we are here tonight. Now, once the questions about the gloves got loud enough, an explanation appeared. And the explanation is where this whole thing goes from suspicious to almost unbelievable, so pay very close attention to the order of events. Claressa Shields said there was an injury, a finger injury, and not an injury from the fight itself, no. She said the injury happened days before the fight. Days before. Now, the public already knew about her knee. That had been reported, discussed out in the open for a while. But a finger injury? Nobody had heard one single word about a finger injury before this exact moment. Not in a press run. Not at the weigh-in. Not in any interview on any day leading up to that fight. And that timeline is doing an absolutely enormous amount of work, because it only became public after people started pointing at the gloves. Think about that silence for a second. If a fighter is genuinely hurt days before a bout, real hurt, the kind of hurt that makes it painful to remove a glove, that information almost always leaks somewhere. Trainers talk. Sparring partners talk. Camp insiders talk. There are weigh-in cameras, open workouts, media scrums, 100 microphones between the injury and the ring. And yet, nothing. Total silence. And then the moment the internet asks why Claressa Shields would not take the gloves off, suddenly there is a fully formed injury story with a date attached to it. A story from Claressa. About Claressa. Surfacing only when Claressa needed it. I am not saying that is impossible. Injuries get hidden all the time. Fighters are famous for it. I am saying the sequence of events is the reason this story has legs. And the sequence is not Claressa's friend right now. And here is the turn that really sent the internet into a frenzy, because some people took that explanation, turned it over, and noticed something dark underneath it. Stay with me here. If, hypothetically, there were ever something inside a glove that did not belong there, something hard, something added, what do you think repeatedly punching another human being with full force would do to the hand wrapped around it? It would damage it. It would bruise it, cut it, maybe even injure a finger. In other words, the very injury offered as an alibi is also, in theory, an injury consistent with the allegation itself. The excuse and the evidence point at the same hand. That is why people online started saying the explanation sounds less like a defense and more like a confession wearing a disguise. Again, alleged. Again, unproven. But that single question, could the injury have happened inside the gloves, changed this entire conversation from gossip into something much more serious. And it is a question that does not go away once it has been asked out loud. It sits in the room. It waits. And every time this story comes back up, it asks itself again. And before anybody says the internet invented this kind of suspicion out of thin air, let me remind you that boxing has stood in this exact spot before. This sport has a scar tissue memory. Go back to Luis Resto in 1983, whose gloves were illegally tampered with, padding removed by his own trainer, and whose opponent, Billy Collins Jr., took such punishment that night that his career ended and his life spiraled from there. Go back to Antonio Margarito in 2009, caught with a hardened substance in his hand wraps before a title fight, a scandal that forced the entire sport to re-examine every victory he had ever celebrated. Both times, the warning signs were there before the proof arrived. Both times, the people asking questions early were called crazy, obsessed haters, and both times, the questions turned out to be the sanest thing in the room. That history is why boxing fans do not laugh allegations like this off. That history is why the footage matters. Nobody is saying Claressa Shields is Resto or Margarito. Nobody. Claressa has earned real things in this sport, and those do not vanish because of one night. What people are saying is that this sport taught them the hard way what the early warning signs look like, and they are not going to be shamed into ignoring what their eyes are showing them now. Now let us talk about the knockout itself, because the boxing world is not treating this stoppage like a normal win, and the reason why goes straight to the image Claressa has spent her entire career building. This is a fighter who talks like she belongs on the same shelf as Mike Tyson. That is her chosen comparison, not mine. Claressa Shields carries herself like nobody alive can touch her, like the record books are just waiting for her signature. Like greatness is not a goal but a mailing address she already lives at. And listen, confidence is beautiful. I love a confident champion. But when you publicly claim that altitude, you are inviting the public to hold you to that standard every single time you climb through the ropes. That is the deal. You cannot claim the throne with your mouth and then need something questionable in your hand to keep it. That math does not work, it has never worked, and people feel the discrepancy in their gut even before they can explain it. And about that finish, watch it again. Watch her opponent. Because that woman refused to go down easily. She fought through it. She stayed on her feet as long as her legs would allow, and she showed the kind of heart that makes fans stand up in their living rooms. She was clearly battling through something, and still she would not just fall over and hand over the highlight reel. People respected that. People noticed that. And yet the official results still went down as another knockout on Claressa's record, another name on the list, another clip for the reel, even though half the internet watched that fight and walked away feeling like they had seen something other than a clean, ordinary stoppage. When a victory raises more questions than it answers, the victory itself becomes part of the story. Which brings us to the moment after the fight, the moment that, for me personally, ties this entire story into a knot tighter than the one on that young woman's head. Right after the final bell, Claressa was all in her opponent's face, smiling, laughing, congratulating her, saying she hopes everything works out for her. Warm as summer, sweet as pie, cameras catching every bit of it. And if you have followed Claressa Shields' career for any length of time, you have seen this exact scene before. Because this is the same energy people criticized her for during that whole infamous situation with a former friend, the one that turned ugly, where she was accused of acting friendly in public while something very different was happening behind the scenes. Smiling in somebody's face while, allegedly, the knives were already out. We watched that movie already. We know how it ended. And now here is the sequel, same lighting, same smile. Because if any part of this allegation turns out to be true, go back and look at that post-fight embrace again. Look at it. Imagine standing there congratulating a woman, hugging her, wishing her well, knowing exactly what you allegedly did to put that swelling on her head. A genuine smile and a calculated smile look identical from the outside. That is what makes them useful. And that is the part of the story that sits the heaviest with me. Heavier than the gloves, heavier than the timeline, because it speaks to pattern. Not a pattern of equipment. Pattern of character. And let us be honest about what a real investigation would even look like, because this is not complicated. Gloves can be inspected. Wraps can be examined. Commission officials supervise the hand wrapping before every sanctioned fight, which means there were trained eyes in that locker room, and those eyes can be asked on the record what they saw. There is a paper trail for every piece of equipment that enters a championship ring. If everything was clean, a transparent review clears Claressa's name in a week and humiliates every critic, myself included. That is the part her defenders should be screaming for. Because sunshine is the accused best friend when the accusation is false. But when the response to hard questions is silence from the top and a conveniently timed injury story from the camp, people do not hear innocence. They hear strategy. And in the court of public opinion, strategy reads a whole lot like guilt, fair or not. And while all of that is burning, the other half of the story is quietly getting written, and it is being written by the woman who left that ring with the knot on her head and her dignity somehow fully intact. Watch how she has carried herself since that night. No wild accusations. No messy interviews. No crying for the cameras. She has said very little, and every word she has said has been measured, graceful, and just pointed enough to keep the story breathing. That is not an accident. That is a woman who knows the footage is doing all the talking she needs, and every calm, classy appearance she makes only sharpens the contrast with the chaos swirling around the champion. The public loves an underdog who keeps her composure while the storm rages above her. And right now she is giving a masterclass in exactly that. People are not just asking what happened in that ring anymore. They are starting to ask who the real role model was standing in it. So let us lay the whole case out on the table the way the internet has assembled it, piece by piece. Piece 1. A decade-long ritual of removing the gloves immediately after every fight, documented across multiple years, multiple opponents, multiple cameras, with zero exceptions until this one fight. Piece 2. A level of visible damage on this opponent that no previous opponent of Claressa Shields ever displayed, the kind of knot that made casual viewers pause their screens and zoom in. Piece 3. A refusal to remove the gloves afterward so absolute that a child had to help her drink water at the press table while everyone else sat barehanded and comfortable. Piece 4. A finger injury that nobody had ever heard about, announced only after the glove questions started, with a timeline that conveniently predates the fight and conveniently surfaced after the scrutiny. And Piece 5. An injury that, under the very allegation being discussed, could have been caused by the very thing it is being used to deny. 5 pieces. Each one alone could be nothing. Coincidences happen, injuries happen, emotions run high after fights. I will be the first to say it. But patterns are not built from one piece. Patterns are built when the pieces keep arriving from the same direction. And this pile of pieces has the entire boxing community staring at it like a puzzle nobody wants to finish. Because finishing it means saying the quiet part out loud. And the quiet part is a scandal that would shake women's boxing to its foundation. And here is the thing that should genuinely unsettle every single person watching this. It took a random fan with a phone and too much time on their hands to assemble what the people paid to protect the integrity of the sport apparently could not see, or chose not to see. The commissions have replay booths. The networks have production trucks stacked with monitors. The sanctioning bodies have officials whose entire job description is to notice when something is off. And yet the alarm was not raised by a single one of them. It was raised by the comments section, by the group chats, by ordinary viewers who watched the same broadcast as the professionals and trusted their own eyes more than the official silence. Either every institution in that building missed the most obvious anomaly of the night, or somebody saw it and decided the less said, the better. I do not know which of those two options frightens me more. Neither should you. And here is what fascinates me most about this moment. The silence from the top. The commissions have said nothing. The promoters have said nothing. The network that aired the fight has said nothing. The only people talking are the fans, the internet detectives, and a handful of fighters whispering off the record to anybody who will listen. When the institutions go quiet and the public goes loud, that gap right there is where stories like this grow teeth. Because every day without answers is another day the footage does the talking, and the footage, love it or hate it, is not whispering. The footage is shouting. Meanwhile, Claressa's supporters are not taking this lying down, and I want to be fair here, and honestly, their side deserves to be heard too. They say this is what happens to dominant women in sports. They say every great female athlete eventually gets accused of being too strong, too physical, too something, and that a hidden finger injury explains everything from the tape to the gloves to the press conference. They say the knot was a head clash, an elbow, a punch that landed just right, and that the internet has convicted Claressa Shields without a single piece of laboratory evidence. And you know what? Some of that could be true. All of it could be true. That is exactly why this conversation matters. Because right now we have questions stacked to the ceiling and answers stacked exactly nowhere. No glove inspection results made public. No formal investigation announced. Just a champion, a knot, a water bottle, and a timeline that gets stranger every time you read it. So now it is your turn, because I already know this comment section is about to be a war zone. Are you team investigate this fully, test the gloves, release the findings, let the truth fall wherever it falls? Or are you team this is a witch hunt against a great champion who earned every single win the hard way? And here is the question I really need answered below. If that finger injury was real and it happened days before the fight, why did we hear about the knee for weeks but not one whisper about the hand that threw the punches? Somebody make that make sense for me, because I have turned it over 100 times and it will not sit still. And if you think this story ends here, you have not been paying attention, because there is more footage circulating right now. Slowed down clips from the 4th round that people claim show something shifting inside the glove itself. I have seen them. I am still verifying them. And the moment I can stand behind every frame, you already know I am bringing it straight here. So make sure you are subscribed with the notifications on, because part 2 of this story might be the one that changes everything. Drop your take below, share this with somebody who watched the fight live, and I will see you in the next one. Keep your eyes open and your gloves honest.